right. So, let's see. We ended with, remember we were discussing like the different ethical theories, remember that? And I think we kind of went through what your all's favorites were. So we were talking about utilitarianism, which is whatever brings about the most happiness, right? And then we were talking about Kantian ethics, which is deontology. Kind of fancy word for treating people as an end in and of themselves, right? And never lying to them. And then virtue ethics, which is Aristotle, which is the emulation of certain ethical or virtues, right? Kind of like you're wanting to be like a particular superhero, and you want to be like that person. And then the last one's divine command theory, which is that God commands it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Euthyphro problem, which was brought up in a dialogue with Plato, which is if God, does God do good because it is good, or is that which is good good because God commanded it? Right. So that's the Euthyphro problem. Does God do good because it is good, or which is good, or is good that which God commands? Right. So if you had to choose between one of those two, which one would you say, just conceptually? Even if you don't believe God or anything like that, just on a conceptual level, what would you think? So, tell you what, let's go around the room. I'm going to have you guys write down which one of those options you feel is better. Does God do good because it is the good thing to do, or do you think things are good because God commands them to be that way? Like whatever God commands is good, right? So like, it's like your favorite person and you're following them and they go to your favorite, their favorite store, and then since they're going to their favorite store, that's the best store. So whatever they do is the best, right? Have you ever had someone that you knew like that, someone you looked up to? Whatever they did was the best, right? It could be a person or it could be like a celebrity or something, and you want to sort of kind of deify everything that they do. So, which one do you think? Do you think that God does good because it is the good or the right thing to do? Or do you think that everything that God does and commands is the epitome of what goodness is? The definition, definitive sort of essence of what goodness is. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to write that down. We'll kind of go around the room and see what each of you individually think. Instead of doing it in groups, we'll just do it individually. So I'll put you on the spot. So I'll just give you like 2 minutes to write that down. Not 5, 2. It was never this quiet in high school, right? When you guys were in high school?
We have to go to high school hopefully to get.
When you guys went to high school, was it this quiet?
No.
No, people were yelling, calling each other names, cussing at each other. Like at homes, they cuss. It's terrible. But it's quiet, man. College is quiet. Of course, it's not as bad. Middle school's the worst. But I like college. It's much better. It's quieter. Although it's kind of eerie quiet. Yes.
Can you go back to the slide second?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah. So does God do good because it is good, or is it because God commands it? Whatever God commands, that's the right thing. Whatever He makes to come into existence, that's what's good. It's kind of a Euthyphro problem. Let's kind of see where you all stand. Whoever wants to go first. So much time. That's cool. I can see the time and the tab. I never saw that. I can see the time and the tab. See that? That tab you can see.
22nd.
It is so cool. I didn't know that. That makes it a lot easier. Instead of like taking the window and making it small and putting it underneath, I can just look at that.
It only works if you don't have a million tabs and they're microscopic.
I always have a million tabs. I have to have a million tabs. That's like, this is actually a pretty, that's actually a pretty, pretty conservative amount. I usually have lots of tabs. That's usually nothing compared to what I usually have. All right, we'll go around the room and see what you guys think. We'll start from right to left. All right, what do you think? Do you think that God, just conceptual, it's just like, do you think that God does good because it's the right thing to do, it's the good thing to do, or do you think that whatever God does, that defines what goodness is? So God is the basis for good. What do you think? So goodness kind of is the standard. God's like, well, I got to do good. That's what God's do, right? Do the right thing. What do you think? It's the right thing to do. Okay. So there's a standard, and he's just got to abide by it, just like we all do. Trey, what do you think? Do you think that God does good because it's the right thing to do, or do you think whatever he does is the essence of the epitome of goodness? Or is there a good option? Goodness doesn't exist. Okay, now what was it? Because that weird sound came. It's not. So basically, are you saying that everything that is good because God can do good? Or are you saying that God does good based on goodness? Like he just is a good guy, so he's going to do good. Or is it whatever he does is the epitome of goodness? And it's kind of like a weird play, weird in a way, but there's a huge difference because the first one I said, which is God does good because it's good to do. Okay, these two. Does God do good because it's the right thing to do? Or whatever God does is the epitome and the definition of what goodness is? Okay, so it's the first one. All right, makes sense. Nasina, what do you think? Do you think that God does good because it's the right thing to do? Or do you think that whatever God does defines what goodness is? So would you say that God defines what goodness is? Okay. Because God is. Okay. Makes sense. What do you guys think back here? What do you think? Which one? I know it's a tough one. Or you can have a third option. You can go, in logic there's this term called going between the horns, where people give you what is often called a false dichotomy, like either A or B. And you're like, well, what about C? So you just go between the horns. But, assuming those are your only options, which one would you choose? God does good. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So it's not because whatever he commands is good, but he does good because it's the right thing to do. Okay. What do you think?
Said God knew good was good.
Yeah, okay, so whatever, God has to conform to goodness, right? Just do everything just like we do. We are like that song, God will run the rest of the slop. You ever heard that song? Anyone ever heard that song? It's old, man. No one's ever heard that song? God was one of us? Like a slob, like. You ever heard that? It's an old song. Okay, so what do you think? Good, okay. So God does good because whatever is good, he's supposed to do it. I don't know if he has to do it. He should do it. So what do you think? Does God do good because it's the right thing to do, or does whatever God does or commands just automatically define goodness?
I think he does good because he knows it's more right, that it is good, but why would he define good with, the Ten Commandments and commanding that these things are good, that we should know that these things are good, right? Or should
So are you kind of like conflicted because you're like, okay, I know that God does good because it's the right thing to do, but then he kind of creates these rules and laws that instantiate what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
So are you not sure then? Or would you're kind of on the fence?
How did it go?
Kind of in between, yeah. It's a real pickle, man. Real theological pickle. What do you think?
God does good because it's right.
Right thing to do. Yeah, he's like, I gotta do the right thing because, like, even though I'm God, I still gotta, conform to goodness. What do you think?
I believe the first branch, God does good because it is good.
Because it's the right thing to do. Okay, that makes sense. What do you think? I know you just we're just talking about it's called Euthyphro's dilemma, and basically, Euthyphro presents this problem, which is okay. If God does God do good because it is good, or whatever God commands that just defines what is good. So would you say that he does it because it's good, not because whatever he does kind of defines what's goodness? Okay, so I'd say the majority of people. Now, and this was supposedly a demonstration, because remember, like Plato at the time, he had a lot of problems with a lot of the perspectives on the religion at the time, because a lot of the gods were kind of anthropomorphized. What that means is they were based on, human attributes and human characteristics. And, Plato was basically saying, look, there's no way that God, assuming, God exists, God would be like us in that sense. So God, like Zeus, would not just get angry, right? And whatever his anger is, that's what's right, right? It'd have to be that God would even have to conform to goodness. So the idea of this dilemma was, if God exists, he would have to conform to goodness. So that means goodness is above him, or it, or her, whatever. So since goodness is above a deity, or the deity, then goodness is a higher sort of principle than even God themselves. Does that make sense? Right? Now, of course, the solution to this dilemma is, if God is the basis for all goodness, then they're identical. Right? It's like, God is goodness. So anytime you see goodness in the world, you're essentially seeing God. Right? Like when you observe the world around you, you observe goodness in a sense. It's really strange because you're just talking about physical properties. Like if you look at a chair, you're not really looking at a chair. Like light isn't bouncing off of this concept called chairs, right? It's bouncing off of an object in space, and that all that information is being fed into your eyeball and going through your optic nerve and going through your nervous system and into your brain. Your brain's creating this concept, but you literally don't see chair. Or maybe you do. Maybe you're observing it, right? Like there was a philosopher named Edmund Husserl who felt that we can actually observe numbers. It's not a concept, it's something you literally observe. So if you take that to that extreme, you observe ethical systems, you observe ethics, you observe morality, you observe goodness. And according to Plato, the world or reality is made up of three things: goodness, beauty, and truth. So beauty would be not just what you normally think of beauty, hair salon, all that stuff. Beauty is just art. Beauty is just the organization of things, how things just have this sort of essence of aesthetic value to it, intrinsically. So he would say that everything, the universe is predicated on this aesthetic value, on goodness, which is ethics, and on truth, or logic, right? Those three things. But if you want to be a stickler to this, the way to solve Euthyphro's problem is just simply to invoke the idea that God is literally the same as goodness. Does that kind of make sense? So if you have a problem with that, and you have somebody's trying to argue the point, you could just argue that. So, all right, let's move on. Does everybody understand Euthyphro's problem pretty much? All right, good. Oh, I gotta get you in the attendance. You're, Rocio, right? Okay. Okay, let's go to, so we're there. All right, let's go to moral reasoning. Yeah, is that? Yeah. Moral reasoning. So this week we're not going to have any assignments. Yay. But I'm gonna have like maybe a discussion board post or something you'll engage with, but nothing major. Just maybe a question for you guys to engage. But other than that, there aren't gonna be any like case studies, because typically we'll have case studies well, not by now, but typically week to week we'll have case studies that you have to write out. But we don't have anything to write out formally this week, so that's good. So we're gonna talk a little bit about moral reasoning. So moral reasoning is critical reasoning when applied to morals and ethics. So moral reasoning is kind of doing ethics. It's stepping outside of a situation and not just making moral decisions, but thinking about the moral decisions that you're about to make. Like, have you ever been in traffic? I get told this all the time. Like, I'm driving and I'm about cussing somebody out, and, like that. People are driving, they're like, "Oh, you don't want to get shot? You want to get shot? That's how you get shot." I'm like, "Who cares?" But you know what I mean? I'm not thinking, right? I'm just reacting. So moral reasoning is thinking about your behavior, not just the consequences of your behavior, but whether they're ethical. Because you can have bad consequences to a behavior, and they can still be ethical, right? I mean, you could stand up to a oppressive government, and even though you're doing the right thing, the consequences could be bad, because you could face a firing squad or whatever. But the consequences are bad. So moral reasoning is critical reasoning when applied to morals and ethics. So it's stepping outside of your usual moral engagement and thinking about what you're doing, and thinking about what other people are doing too. Like, was that moral? Was that right that she gave me that look, or she yelled at me or something? You guys had moral conflicts like that, when a teacher kind of give you a funny look, or was mean to you, or somebody in traffic was a jerk. So now we talk about critical reasoning. So critical reasoning. Now, critical reasoning is just the general sort of understanding of how you make an argument. And going back, I think we've discussed a little bit like when you argue online with somebody. Has anyone ever had arguments online with anyone? Like somebody say something, you're like, "Oh, really? Oh, whatever." It could be political, it could be, I mean, you'll get somebody on there, they'll say something ridiculous, and like, "Oh, the Earth's flat." And you're like, "That's bullshit." It's not flat. So what you're doing is you're constructing an argument, and you're evaluating their argument. So you construct your own argument, right? You make your own argument, and then you evaluate the soundness of someone else's argument, the soundness or the how well the argument's either presented or how it's constructed, right? Because have you guys seen bad arguments? Right, you ever seen that? I tell you, dude, I don't think I should tell you this one. This is the dumbest argument I have probably heard my entire. I'm 51 years old. It's the dumbest argument I've ever heard my entire life. You guys want to hear? I mean, it's really dumb. This just shows the epitome of some people's bigotry. Like my son, he has a friend, and his friend's got this really bigoted uncle who's just a real jerk, piece of crap. Anyways, he is against homosexuality, but only in men, but not in women. And my son's friend Spencer was like asking, "Why? What's the difference?" He's like, "Oh, because women have softer skin, so it's okay." I was like, "What?" When he told me this, I was like, "Is this guy did he sniff too much glue when he was young?" Isn't that the dumbest argument you've ever heard? Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. That's the dumbest argument. But what it is basically that's really bad critical reasoning. That's somebody who cannot construct an argument because they're making these premises, and these premises do not follow, right? Like if I were to walk outside, my first premise is, or my first statement, I walk outside, if I walk outside, then the sky must fall or something. That's really bad. There's no way my walking outside is going to result in, sky is not possible. It can't fall anyways. But my walking outside cannot cause something like the sky falling, right? It's just not something that can happen. That's a really bad argument. That's actually called a modus ponens, which is a if-then statement. And it's predicated on the assertion of the, not the consequent, the antecedent. We'll go over some of those technical terms. And there's a little, we'll talk a little bit about the technical terms of logical, formal logical structures. We'll talk about syllogisms and these sorts of things. But basically, we'll also talk about the soundness. So it's construction. An argument is a pattern set of assertions. That's all it is. Just a pattern set of assertions. So like, if I go outside, the sky's going to fall. I mean, that is a pattern set of assertions. So it's not about soundness. Formally, that is a very logically valid argument. It's just a very unsound. And we'll go over the difference between logical, like a formal fallacy and informal fallacy, whether something's valid or invalid, sound or unsound. So if an argument is valid, it means that it's structured right. It's structured appropriately, just the stuff in it's terrible, it's just not working. So you can have a valid argument that's just simply, like that one guy that said that lesbian homosexuality is okay because women have softer skin. Okay, he could probably formulate that in a valid argument, but it's really, really unsound. Terrible argument. But he could probably formulate it in a valid sort of structure, but he can't argue it in a sound way because it's very unsound. But an argument is a pattern set of assertions. So at least one statement providing support for another statement, it's like a chain. You know, like chain, you've heard the old saying that a chain is only strong as its weakest link, right? So if you have a set of assertions, and there's one assertion you're making that's kind of weak, that's probably the one you're probably going to have to really focus on, because that's what's going to either allow your argument to, be supported and supportable, and there's a fancy word in philosophy called tenable, or it's going to collapse. It's just not going to work. So at least one statement, you have to provide support for another statement, and each statement is like a chain. If this, then this. If this, then this. Or this in that. This in that. It's all this chain. If one of those links in that chain is weak, then the whole thing falls. Even though all this other stuff, works, if one of them doesn't, is untenable or not going to work, then the whole argument goes, right? Just like a house. I mean, if the foundation's not, made properly, it's just going to cave in. And that's the same way with an argument. The argument, the structure is the foundation, and if one of those links is not working, it's just going to fold. Right? And the support statement is okay. So at least one statement providing support for another. It's like a chain. And the supported statement is a conclusion. So you got premises and conclusion. That's basically what a formal argument is. You have premises, which are statements that are supposedly correct. And if these statements or premises are supposedly correct, there should be a logical flow toward a conclusion. Like if I go out, if it's raining outside and I walk outside, I will get wet. And I say, it is raining outside and I'm walking outside, therefore I will get wet. That's not only a valid argument, it's a sound argument. Because typically, unless you have an umbrella or some sort of extra statement to say that you're going to be shielded from the rain, you're going to get wet. Unless the laws of physics or something else functions differently in some parallel universe, you're going to get wet. So that's a pretty sound and it's a valid argument. And that would be your conclusion. Your conclusion is, but I'm going to get wet. That's my conclusion. I'm getting wet. All right, arguments versus persuasion. Can somebody tell me what they think the difference between argument or persuasion would be? Yeah.
Arguing with someone is just communicating your point across and trying to prove someone wrong, they are wrong. Whereas persuasion is trying to get someone to see your side on the board.
Yes. So an argument would be, I think 2 + 2 = 4. I'm not trying to persuade you that. I'm just telling you, a fact that I am convinced of or whatever. But if I'm trying to persuade you something like, oh my gosh, the children are failing in this particular school, we have to do something about it. We all as a community, I'm trying to persuade you to do something, right? To actually, to accept my conclusions so that you will agree with me. Because if you agree with me, then you'll want to actually do something about it. So persuasion is you agreeing with me. An argument is, I don't care if you agree with me or not, this is just my view or my perspective or what I would say is true. I don't care if someone else agrees or disagrees, just as long as you recognize that it's a valid and sound argument. They're not the same. So arguments give reasons for their conclusions. So an argument's going to give reasons for their conclusion. It's going to be like, bum, bum, and here's the conclusion. So I'm giving you reasons, a logical reasons. Persuasion's attempt to convince one of an opinion or to influence people's opinions. So an opinion is, we have to increase, if politicians would say we have to increase the debt ceiling. If we don't, then the economy is going to collapse. So we have to increase. So I'm trying to persuade you of my position, as opposed to trying to make a logical argument. If we don't do this, therefore this will happen. Instead of me trying to give a logical argument, I'm trying to persuade you. I'm just trying to persuade you of my opinion, where someone else's opinion might be just as valid, right? Like if I'm, like going door to door and saying, you have you heard the good word or the good news? I'm trying to convince you of something, of whatever it is. So, okay, here's a good example. Law enforcement in our city is a failure, providing examples of law enforcement's failures. So, would that be, an example of an inductive argument? Law enforcement in our city is a failure. It's just making a statement, right? It's just making a statement. Again, how would you define failing? What does that mean? It could be an emotional appeal. It doesn't necessarily have an objective standard that everyone will agree with. Because some people may see what one person sees as failure, some might see as successful. So it depends on what you mean. You have to kind of further that statement. Okay, so let's go into what a basic, has anyone ever heard the term basic syllogism? This is a logical structure. It's a basic syllogism. So here is a basic syllogism. It is wrong to take the life of an innocent person. And I'm not agreeing with this. This is just like, pro-lifers who do this. Actually, it's crazy. I was Ubering downtown Cincinnati, right? And I was right there at the corner of Vine Street and McMillan. There was these dudes out there, and they had like a PA system or something. They were going, repent, you're going to hell. They were like telling everybody they're going to hell. And then right up the road on Auburn, which is right here, they had people with the abortion, murder, and all that stuff. And it was like, man, it was a crazy day for people with their protests. But so here's a basic syllogism: it is wrong to take the life of an innocent person. Abortion takes the life of an innocent person. Therefore, abortion is wrong. Now, what this is taking, it's taking. It is wrong to take the life of an innocent person. And then it squishes that into this. So abortion takes the law. So if this premise is true, it's wrong to take the life of an innocent person. I think most people agree with that. I think that first premise is sound. Now this is actually a valid argument. But whether it's sound is another issue. So it is wrong to take the life of an innocent person. There might be people that might even disagree with that. They might think, well, it's okay to take the life of an innocent, like serial killer. Yeah. I love taking the lives of innocent people. It's just not wrong. It's what you do, man. It's what you do. But I think most people would agree with this. But the second one, abortion takes the life of an innocent person. This is assuming, and we'll go over this course when we talk about abortion and some of the issues related to that. Abortion takes the life of an innocent person. This is debatable, right? This is debatable because what is a person? And that's the biggest debate with abortion. At what point does someone become a person, or something become a person? That's debatable, and we'll go into details on why that's such a contentious issue, even in society today. Therefore, abortion is wrong. So this might be a valid argument, but it is not necessarily a sound argument. See the difference? Now, for some people, it might be sound. For other people, it may not be. And that's where you get into the persuasion. People are going to try to persuade you of that second premise. First premise, I don't think you'll have to, do a lot of debating on that one. That's pretty, unless you're a serial killer. I don't know, what's the percentage of people are serial killers? Is it 1 out of every 10? So one of y'all are, I'm just kidding. I think it's probably higher than that, right? But I'd say a majority of people think it's wrong. But the abortion part, taking the life of an innocent person, terminating a pregnancy before the, before the clump of cells, or however you want to talk it, achieves a certain level of consciousness. I'm not going to go into that argument. Some people, argue. Some people believe life or personhood, life starts at conception. Some people don't. But essentially, B is the premise that you're going to have to argue for and persuade people. Does that make sense? Okay. But here's some examples of persuasion, right? So persuasion, law enforcement is horrible in the city. Have you ever heard somebody say that? Yeah, the cops, man, they're terrible. Man, they shot me in the back last week. It's terrible. Nothing seems to work anymore. Have you ever seen that at work? Has anyone ever bitched at work? You guys have a job, or at a job where they just bitch and nothing seems to work anymore. The situation is intolerable. Now, these are attempts not at making an argument. These are not arguments, right? These are statements. They're trying to persuade people. Like if you're in a job and you really hate your job, right? You hate your job, and you have a reason to hate your job, but you're not explaining what that reason is. You're not explaining. You're just complaining or persuading, whatever. It might be just complaining or it might be persuading. But these aren't arguments. These are really forms of persuasion. Some people might see them as forms of bitching, but I don't. But they're essentially trying to persuade someone of a particular situation. Have you guys seen statements like this? Yeah, what?
So I think this slides right after argument versus persuasion.
Yeah. What did you?
Not really.
Oh, sure. That's fine. Just tell me where you. This one right here?
I'm going to take a picture.
Okay, all right.
It won't take long.
All right.
Just go to the next one.
Okay.
I got that one.
Okay.
I got that one.
These are examples of arguments.
I got that one.
Yeah, because argument, unlike persuasion, actually has premises and a conclusion. Persuasion doesn't have any premises, or it just has a statement like, you need to do this because blah, blah, blah. You got that?
Yeah.
Okay, and examples of persuasion. So these were examples of persuasion, right? Okay.
Are we on this one?
What? Yeah, this is the one we were on. And now we're going to the next one. So you got them all?
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. Awesome. Okay. So now we're going to talk about deductive and inductive arguments. Yay! I promise, guys, these are like the most boring part of our class. I swear to God. I swear. This is like, it'll get more interesting after. This is like the most technical stuff. This is not technically a technical class. Ooh, do you like that? Technically not technical. I just contradicted myself. But it's not, except this stuff. Deductive and inductive arguments. And we're just going to kind of briefly, because it's important for you to understand how to construct an argument if you're going to evaluate argument, particularly in healthcare. Because you're going to have people that you're going to work with that are going to come up with conclusions about various ethical issues, and you're going to have to, deal with those. You have to figure out how to address them. So we got deductive and inductive arguments. Anybody want to take a stab at what the difference between deductive and inductive arguments are? Yeah.
I feel like one of them would have a sound passing, it has a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, inductive, there's a beginning, there's a middle, but there isn't really an end, it cuts off.
Actually, it's very similar because deductive is if the premises
are true, well, I'll show you this, I'll show you the next slide, it's gonna say this. If the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true. There is no, it's 100% has to be true. Inductive, it doesn't have to be true, there's just a higher level of probability. And we'll explain, I'll show you some examples of that, of the difference between something that has to be true. If the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be. And if the premises are true, more than likely it's true, but it's always possible it's not, right? But I'll show you the difference between the two. So here is conclusive. So a deductive argument is conclusive. What it means is that that has to be true. So this is a conclusive argument. It is wrong to take the life of an... Now this is only, again, this is only assuming that both premises are true. Again, we don't know if B is true. Actually, we don't know if A is true. I think most people agree. So if all of society agrees on A, then we're good with that. B, abortion takes life from an innocent person. We don't know. But let's say everybody, the whole society agrees, then C, it has to follow that abortion is wrong, right? According to these two premises. So this is in a conclusive argument. This is an argument where conclusive means it has to be true. That's all. But again, that's assuming the premises are true. We don't know if they're true, particularly B. Logically conclusive equals no way the conclusions can be false if the premises are true. So, and again, I'll put all these slides up on the thing or on Blackboard. But yeah, logically conclusive means no way the conclusions can be false if the premises are true. And there's no way the premises are true if the conclusion is false. So if the conclusion is false, then the premises cannot be true. But if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true, period. Again, that previous example, we don't know if premise B is true. So since that's in, that's in dispute, that's disputable, then we can't say that the conclusion is true. But if everyone agreed that A and B were true, then C would have to be true based on our moral commitments and values. Does that make sense? Right. The structure of the argument guarantees this. So the way the argument's structured, it guarantees it. So like still a syllogism, just the way it's set up, it has to be true. Right? So you're A, B, B, C, A, C. So it's I'm just going to show you. Oh, here we go. So basically, like you got premise A equals B, and then let's see, A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. It's just simple, right? Just simple math, right? I mean, the way it's set up, the way that structure of the argument is set up, it has to be true. So if your conclusion is A is C, if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then A has to be equal to C. It has to be equivalent. That makes sense? Real simple. Simple math. I'm terrible at math too. Here's a valid. All dogs are mammals. So now we're going to talk about valid and invalid. So this is valid. This is valid. All dogs are mammals. Rex is a dog. Therefore, Rex is a mammal. Right? So all dogs are mammals. So a better way of doing this, instead of that, we'll put it in a Venn diagram kind of thing. Kind of like a Venn diagram. We're not going to have two separate ones, but all dogs. So all dogs are mammals. So this is mammals. Right? There's a lot of types of mammals, right? I mean, dogs aren't the only mammals, but you're never going to find a dog that's not a mammal. Right? So then dogs, right? Dogs are a mammal. I mean, you could have humans and blah, 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 leopards, whatever, subspecies. But dogs. Now, what's Rex? What is Rex?
A dog.
He's a dog, right? So he's in here. He's even more sort of precise. Right? He's even he's within the realm of dogs. So that's Rex. So if Rex is a dog, what's that mean? He's also what? Yeah, because he's in that circle. If he's in the circle of dogs, and dogs are in the circle of mammals, then he has to be. Now, if I were to say all human, or let's say all humans are mammals, because humans, that's true, right? All humans are mammals. But then I said Rex is a dog. Could I conclude Rex is a mammal from that? I couldn't. I mean, we know that dogs are mammals, but from the structure of that, there's no way I know, because all I know is that all humans are mammals. Rex is a dog. I didn't say nothing about dogs up here. You know what I mean? So if I changed it to all humans are mammals, Rex is a dog, like where the hell did that come from? Squirrel. Then Rex is a mammal. I wouldn't be able to conclude that. But since this is in here, I can conclude that. Since what Rex is also included in all mammals, then I conclude that Rex is a mammal. Does that make sense? But that's valid. That's valid. Now, we'll show you the invalid. I think I have an invalid example. Yeah, I should have an invalid. Oh, yep, here it is. So all dogs are mammals. John is a mammal. So John, he's a mammal, right? But I don't know what the heck John is. I mean, John could be, he could be a chimpanzee. I don't know. I don't know what he is. I don't know what John is. It doesn't say John's a dog, right? Or John is, it doesn't tell us. So all dogs are mammals, right? So John's a mammal, but how do we know John's a dog? There's nothing in these premises that says, so that'd be invalid, right? Have you ever had anybody give you like a really crappy argument like that? Like these kind of, those are kind of they're called ad hoc, which means to this, which means to nothing. Because these premises, nothing follows from that. I can't conclude that John's a dog just by saying he's a mammal and so is dog. Dogs are mammals. Yay, dogs are mammals, and so are John. But that doesn't mean these two are corresponding. It just means they're both mammals. So since they're both mammals, that's all I can conclude about that, is that they're both mammals. Yay. But it says nothing about what if John's a dog. It doesn't say that. So that would be invalid. It's also called undistributed middle. The reason they call it undistributed middle is because John is not included, or the dog's not included in mammals. It's just John is. And John is not included in a subcategory that's included here, right? He's an extra category that's over here. And there's no association with him and dogs. So since he's dog, I don't know, I can't conclude that he's a dog. All I know is he's a mammal and so are dogs. That makes sense? All right, so that'd be invalid, right? It doesn't matter if it sounds. John could be a dog, right? Could be. I don't know. But according to that argument, I can't tell. So, some people might give you arguments that have true conclusions, but you can't conclude them based on the arguments they've given you, right? Like if somebody says, well, the sky is blue, let's see, the sky looks like a sapphire, therefore it's blue. I don't know, it looking like a sapphire has no bearing on whether it's blue, but we do know it's blue, so the conclusion's true. But the argument they're giving you is not valid, because just because something looks like something doesn't mean that it is that thing. So people can give you bad arguments, have true conclusions. So you want to watch out for that too. So that's invalid. Now, inductive arguments. Let's do that. They give probable conclusions to an argument. So, unlike that, where it has to follow from that, it doesn't have to. More than likely it will. But it doesn't have to necessarily. It's possible that it's wrong. And there are a lot of things in the world that we don't. I don't know if there's a world outside of my brain. I don't know. Actually, even going that far, I don't know how I can even tell what
level of probability there is that there is one. But aside from that, most of the time we can tell there's a higher or a lower level of probability. We'll give you, I think I have an example here. Yeah, here it is. So 85% of students at this university are Republicans. I'm not saying this is just an example that the book gives. So 85% of students at a particular, not this necessarily university, but a particular, are Republicans. Sonia, she's a student at this university. So Sonia's probably, gosh, I don't know why it's not showing the whole thing. Let me pull this. Why is it? Yeah. Why is it not? So it should say Sonia is probably a Republican, right? It should say that. Right. I don't know why it's cutting it off. But anyways, so 85% of students at this university are Republican. Sonia is a student at this university. Therefore, Sonia is probably a Republican. So that's just because it's a higher percentage, because there's only 15% of the population at the university are Democrat or other or independent. Majority of them are Republicans, so there's a good chance she's probably Republican, right? But it's possible she's not. So this is an example of an inductive argument. It's possible it's not the case. It's just more than likely it is the case. You know, every time I hit this cue ball and it hits this other ball, that other ball is probably going to move. But it's always possible. You never know. It may not. Maybe the laws of physics only have been working for the past how many ever thousands of years that humans have been observing it, or millions and millions, billions of years that we have observed in structures that we've observed from past sort of, you know, conclusions. You know, basically, it's possible that it's not true. Right. So it's possible that Sonia is not a Republican, but more than likely she is. Does that make sense? And I think an example. Let's see. What's that thing? Okay, I'll just use it. So the difference between this, the ballot one, ballot for deduction. Not here. Anyways, induction. Here, let's do this. Okay. So let's see. So we got student body, right? Majority Republicans. So here's the whole population of Republicans at that university, right? And here's all the students, right? Let's say. Let me do this. Just a small sliver. Here's all students. There's only a small sliver that's not. So it's possible that Sonia is here, right? It's possible she's here. But since a majority of them are Republicans, more than likely she's there. But you cannot say. So an inductive is kind of like that. It's not perfectly in that category, so you can't really fully say, but there's a good chance that that the conclusion is true. That's pretty sound, right? Does that make sense? That hopefully it does. All right. When a deductive argument has premises that are true and therefore its conclusions follow, it is said to be sound. So if let's see, a Rex is. Let me see if that Rex is a dog is up there. If the deductive argument is structured appropriately, then it is said to be valid. So does that make sense? So if let's see all dogs are mammals. Rex is a dog, therefore Rex is a mammal. If those are sound, if dogs are really mammals, and I mean, do you guys have any like reservations with that possibility, or do you all agree that dogs are mammals? Anybody disagree with that? So we all agree. I mean, I don't think that's pretty much a fact. Dogs are mammals. Rex is a dog. Let's say we bring Rex in here and you examine Rex, and he has floppy ears and tail. He's clearly a dog, right? You even have like a veterinarian come in, or a biologist or something, and they do it. Or they take a graft from the skin of this creature and they send it off to a lab. And it's not a chupacabra, it's not some sort of cryptozoological creature, it's a dog. So if
we would all agree that's a fact. So if those two facts are the case, and is structured, which, validly, which is all dogs are mammals, we all agree with that. Rex is a dog, therefore we conclude Rex is mammals. That's a sound argument. Does that make sense? Sound. And it's valid too, because the premises, if true, the conclusion has to be true. That make sense? So if the conclusion, or if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. There's no possible way they can't be true. So Rex has to be a mammal. If we've concluded that Rex is a dog, and we all agree that dogs are mammals, Rex also has to be a mammal, the way that that argument is structured, right? Now, if we say, all dogs are mammals, what was it? All dogs are mammals, Rex is a human, therefore Rex is a mammal. I can't conclude that because there's nothing in the premises that tell me what humans are. All I know are what dogs are, right? That would be invalid because there's nothing in the premises that can follow to a conclusion. Does that make sense? So if I say all dogs are mammals, John is a human, therefore John is a mammal, there's nothing in those premises that will necessarily follow that conclusion, right? But if they do, then it's sound. If the premises of an inductive argument are true, it's said to be strong. Now that's different, inductive. So 85% of students at this school are Republican. Sonia's a student at the school, then more likely she's a Republican. That's strong. It's not said to be sound, because sound it has to be true. Strong just means more than likely it's true. It's a strong argument. Right? Like if you see me come in every day with a iced coffee every day, let's say, and then there's one day I haven't come in yet, and you're about to see me come in, you can conclude I'll probably have a coffee with me, right? More than likely. That's a strong argument. It's not sound. It doesn't necessarily. I have to necessarily have an iced coffee, but more than likely I will, based on my past behaviors and based on what you've observed. So more than likely, it's a strong argument, right? You guys probably run on that all the time, like strong arguments. Like, let's say you didn't work that many hours this week, so you're probably going to have a low paycheck. It's possible your employer just gives you extra money. You don't know. But based on your past experiences and the contracts you've made with your employer, more than likely they're not going to give you extra money. So you're probably going to come back with a smaller paycheck. That would be a strong argument. It's not sound because it's possible that it's not true. It doesn't have to be true. That's soundness, validity, strongness, and cogency. Now, cogency, is it? Where's cogency? Okay. Where's cogency? Did I have cogency? I don't think I talked about cogency yet. Furthermore, if the conclusion is probable or likely, here it is. If the conclusion is probable or likely, then the argument is said to be cogent, assuming its premises are strong. So an inductive argument, if it's valid and it's strong, both of those two things, it's cogent. Right? So if it's valid and it's strong. Right? So if it's structured right and its premises are sound, then it's right. So I'm going to give you an example. I wish I had those. It's right over here. So if 20% of students are Republican. Oh no, just 20% of students are Republican. John is student. Then John is Republican. Would you guys say that's a strong argument or weak? Weak would be the opposite of strong. What was that? It'd be weak, right? Because only 20% of students are Republican. So if only 20 are, John's probably not a Republican. So if I conclude that John's a Republican based on the student population only being 20%, that's very weak. So a weak argument is one where the conclusion probably doesn't follow from the premises. Now, but it's valid, this is valid, but it's, okay, so if I were to say John is the CEO of Starbucks, I don't even have to tell whether this is a weak or strong. I can immediately say this is invalid because I know that John being the CEO of Starbucks has no bearing on this statement, 20% of students are Republicans. Who cares? Because he's not a student. He has nothing to do, he has nothing to do with the student body. He's the CEO of Starbucks. So I can't really say if he's a Republican just because 20% of students at some school are Republican. So this would not even just be weak, this would be invalid altogether. Because it just, you cannot make that conclusion. Now, even if I put like 99%, I change this, and if I were to somehow associate John with student body, that would be a strong argument. It would be valid. But this isn't valid because he's just the CEO of Starbucks. So yeah, there's a lot of Republicans there, but it has nothing to do with John because John's the CEO of Starbucks. So it has no bearing on him being a Republican. Have you guys ever seen somebody make an argument like that where the two premises like have no bearing on each other? Like, have you ever seen that meme of that kid that says, what was it, he's a turtle? Has anyone seen that? Or I like turtles. Have you ever seen that? Remember that? Yeah. But like, it has no bearing on the question that this reporter asks. Like, what was it like? Are you having a good time or something like that? I forget what it was. And he was like, I like turtles. I mean, that's pretty much what that is. These two premises have nothing to do with each other, and that would be invalid. So invalid is where the premises do not kind of coalesce or go along with each other. They don't say anything about each other, so therefore we can't come up with any conclusions. So that would be invalid. So you guys, do you see the difference between valid and invalid, and the strength or the strongness and the cogency of an argument, particularly with inductive? That makes sense. So, okay, so, and probably should write this down. I don't know if I have it in my notes, but so deductive. True. Let's say true. It's going to be sound and valid, right? So false is going to be unsound and invalid. Now the difference, inductive, these are just terms that we use to determine whether they're true or false. True would be, they'd be strong. So true would be strong and cogent. This would be weak and not cogent. Or you could call it invalid. Yeah, valid or invalid for this, I'm not that big a deal. The book tells us cogent. Does that make sense? So if a deductive argument is true, it's going to be sound and valid. If it's false, it's going to be either unsound or invalid or both. So this, it has to be both. This one, it doesn't matter if one of these is, if it's unsound, it's false. If it's invalid, it's false, right? Inductive has to be strong and cogent. If it's false, if it's weak, then it's probably not true. Remember, not necessarily untrue, but it's probably untrue. And if it's formally structured wrong, then it's going to be not cogent. Which that's an example of a non-cogent or whatever, or invalid example. Does that make sense? I know it's a lot to. I know This part of the test, which it's not going to affect your grade that much, this part of the test the students struggle with the most. This is a very small sliver of this course. This is not a logic course, right? But we go over some logic, all right? Just so you know, so you don't get too worried. All right, so 85% of the students at this university are Republican. Sonia is a student at this university. What time is it? Okay, we got a couple minutes. Sonia is a student at this university, therefore Sonia is probably a Republican. This is a cogent argument. It's cogent and it's strong. It's a strong argument. It's cogent. That makes sense? Or you could put strong and cogent, or you can just say cogent. But it's definitely strong and cogent. All right. A non-cogent argument would be law enforcement in this city is horrible. Serious crime has doubled in the past year. So if they're making the argument law enforcement in this city is horrible, serious crime has doubled in the past year, these are two separate claims. Just because serious crime has doubled doesn't mean it has any bearing on law enforcement. It could be that law enforcement is doing the best it can. It could be that law enforcement has been cut. They don't have any law enforcement officers, or it could be that something has happened that has nothing to do with how law enforcement is doing its job. It's just out of their hands. So, this would be a non-cogent argument because you can't really, you have to somehow pin the law enforcement being horrible on the serious crime doubling, right? You have to somehow associate those two. These two on their face do not intermingle. These are two separate sort of premises that aren't necessarily connected. You got to connect serious crime with law enforcement being horrible. Until you can do that, anyone can just come up and just dismiss that argument because they can just say, well, serious crime's doubled because of, there was an earthquake there. I don't know. It could be any variety of things. It has nothing to do with the law enforcement. It just has to do with some terrible event that has happened. Does that make sense? So that would be non-cogent. The cause of serious crime doubling cannot be established by law enforcement's job. The statistics of serious crime I don't know why it's not showing this whole thing. That's probably why, because I need to make this smaller. Make that smaller. There we go. Yeah, so it's not clearly defined by law enforcement's job. Right. Okay. So conditional statements. I'll go over these real quick. If the surgeon operates, then the patient will be cured. These are conditional statements. Unlike syllogisms, you have things called conditional statements. They're if-then. If I do this, then this will happen. Yeah.
After class,
What's that? Oh, that's right. All right. We'll be going over this one.
There's so much going on.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Like I said, I'm going to put these up on Blackboard. I'm going to put all of these slides up on Blackboard, and the very few questions that are going to be on the quiz that are associated with logic, you'll be fine. Trust me. But I will go over them. I'll go over them again Wednesday as well. So I'll kind of do a recap and stuff like that. So if anybody's having trouble keeping up, just let me know. Because, like I said, this is the most technical. Everything else is going to be way easier. It's going to be because we're going to be doing a lot of case studies, and we're going to be talking about whether a particular case study is right or wrong, and how you would address it. Be much better. You're going to be much. This is just sort of laying the foundation for everything. But so if the surgeon operates, then the patient will be cured. I need to put D in. The surgeon operates, therefore the patient is cured. Now I don't know if the surgeon operating will cause the patient to be cured. But let's just assume it necessarily is the case. This surgeon is like God. Every time he operates, somebody is cured of whatever he's operating on. He's like the dude from Grey's Anatomy or something. I don't know, one of those shows. But every time he operates, the patient's going to be cured. The surgeon operates, therefore the patient is cured. That's a pretty valid argument. I don't know if it's sound, but it's very valid. So that is a conditional statement. An example that's if P, then Q. You assert P, therefore, or then Q. That's called modus ponens. It's affirming the antecedent. Just a fancy word for This is the antecedent, this is the consequent. If you affirm, if this is true, this whole statement is true, if you affirm P, because I know P is true, Q has to be true as well. So if I make this statement and this statement is true, if I say P is true, Q has to be true. Now if I say Q is true, it doesn't have to be. But if I say P is Q, it has to be true. So if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. That's just modus ponens. Just a fancy word for affirming the antecedent. All right. It's valid and sound. All right. Now, here is modus tollens. It's the opposite. So it's the same. If P, then Q. I say not Q. Therefore, I can conclude not P. So if the surgeon operates, that's the surgeon operating, then the patient will be cured. The patient will not be cured. Therefore, he didn't operate. So I can conclude that. So you can also conclude by denying the consequent. So the consequent didn't happen. The consequent is not true. Therefore, P, or the antecedent, must not be true as well. Okay? That's called modus tollens. It's denying the consequent. That's valid and sound. All right? So does that make sense? I know. I'm bombarding you with like Logic 101. I remember taking this in college. Pretty mind-blowing stuff. This is like formal logic. I mean, it gets, we're just kind of brushing the surface here. We won't spend too much time. So you got invalid firms. Okay, so here are some invalid forms affirming the consequent. So I can say if P, then Q, Q, then P. That's not true. So if Socrates is a man, then he is mortal. Socrates is mortal, therefore Socrates is a man. Well, I can't conclude that because there's a lot of things that are mortal, right? If Socrates is a man, then Socrates is mortal. Well, if he's mortal, all mortal things are not all men or human. So I can't conclude that Socrates is a man just by the fact he's immortal. There's a lot of things that are mortal. There's a lot of things that die, right? Insects die. He could be an insect. I don't know. So that would be an invalid form. If somebody tries to make this statement, they are wrong. So that's called affirming the consequent. And another one's denying the antecedent. If Socrates is a man, then he is mortal. Socrates is not a man, therefore Socrates is not mortal. Well, yeah, if Socrates is a man, then he's mortal. Okay, we say Socrates is not a man. He could still be mortal. Just because it says if Socrates is a man, then he's mortal. If he's not a man, there are other things that are mortal. Right? Again, going back to the idea, mortal or mortality is a much larger category than just humanity. So it's very possible that Socrates not being a man could be an insect and he's still mortal. So you can't conclude that Socrates is not mortal based on the fact he's not a man. So denying the antecedent is just as invalid as affirming the consequent. So, and we'll do a quick review of this Wednesday as well, because I don't want to overburden you with all this, because I want to start getting into the interesting stuff of the medical ethics as opposed to this kind of stuff. So does anybody have any questions about all this this nerdy logic stuff? Anyone have any questions? All right. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. We're about to dismiss anyway, so take your time. All right, guys. So that's it for today. If you don't have any questions, I guess I'll see you Wednesday. We'll do a brief review of this, and then after that, we're going to go into some more interesting stuff. And we'll even try to do, if you guys want, we'll do like an in-class case study. You guys want to do a case study? It'd be a lot more fun. So we can kind of get this crap off of our mind for a little bit, and we'll do a case study. Sound good? All right, so I'll see you guys Wednesday, and have a good day. And like I said, I'm going to download this stuff and put it up on Blackboard so you can look at it and just go, yeah, this is so interesting. I'm having trouble sleeping, so I'm going to read this. So if you guys, does anybody suffer from insomnia here? No? Yeah, but this will help. It helped me. It'll help me. Studying philosophy, I have no problem sleeping nowadays. I think I attribute philosophy to this, to the fact that I don't. What's that?
Oh, I thought so. Yeah, so see you guys Wednesday, and we'll get into some more interesting stuff.